Hi, my name is Stephen, and I'm going to be talking to you today about user-focused data science. So, just a bit of background on who I am. My name is Stephen. As I said, I grew up in the UK and moved to Norway 3 years ago. I have a background in mathematics and also where thereafter I spent 2 years working in finance within M&A. And then upon moving to Norway 3 years ago, I started working at Sobisteria as a data science consultant. And then now this year, actually, in March, I started working at Elkjøp as a data scientist. So a bit of context about who Elkjøp are and what we do. Elkjøp is the largest electronics retailer within the Nordics. We have over 400 stores in 8 different countries. And so in addition to the traditional Nordic countries, we're also based in Iceland, Faroe Islands, Greenland, and also Greece as well. We have over 10,000 employees currently working at Elkjøp. And so we really have, a lot of data to work with, which means that being a data scientist at Elkjøp is actually very exciting, and there's a lot of use cases available to us. I always think it's useful to give a bit of context as well to how we actually do data science at Elkjøp. There's an organization or a team within Elkjøp called Insights and Analytics, which is made up of 16 employees, where we have data science, which has 4 data scientists, and then a data engineering team and a business intelligence team. And so we very much sit within a very healthy data science and data environment with a very solid basis of data engineering, which means that there's a lot of data available to us, and we are not required to necessarily do a lot of the heavy lifting and the data pipelines in the ETL. And it means that we're able to focus a lot more on giving value with data and creating value from the data. And that leads me very nicely on actually to what I wanted to talk about. So to kind of start talking about user-focused data science, I just wanted to first just address, I guess, where we are currently within the data science industry. I think that we're in a very exciting and interesting phase at the moment in the development of data science. I'm sure that a lot of you have seen this graph before, which shows the development of new technologies over time and I suppose, yeah, as it says here, the visibility, but also, I guess, the effect that technology has. So often what you'll see when a new technology enters the market is there is a very large, what it says here is a peak of inflated expectations, which, is saying this technology will do everything that you'd ever dream of, and it will solve all of your problems. And then obviously at some point, those expectations don't match reality. And so then there's a lot of people that become very disillusioned with that technology. And then you eventually reach this, as it says here, this plateau of productivity where you are, organizations and people are fully aware of what the technology can do, what it can offer. And yeah, things actually start getting done. And so I believe that we, within the data science industry, are very much at this slope of enlightenment at the moment. When I started in data science 3 years ago, we were definitely at that peak of inflated expectations where data science was going to solve all your problems. You were never going to have to do a manual task again. AI would do all of the heavy lifting, and you would only need to do the creative tasks. That is obviously was not the case at that time, and so of course there was a lot of disillusionment. Whereas now I feel like organizations and also individual people are also becoming aware of how data science can add value and how data scientists can add to an organization. And so I think when we're in this moment where people are becoming more aware of what we're doing and also aware of the limitations and what we can offer as data scientists, I think that we need to start to be very aware of delivering value to our organizations and to our businesses. Focusing much more on, okay, which of these data science projects is going to add the most value now, rather than focusing necessarily on the kind of large scale research heavy projects that were probably very popular during this peak of inflated expectations. And so one of the key ways that I think that we can be focusing on this value, and one of the key ways that we can actually deliver this value as a data science or a data science community, is by focusing on the end user very heavily. And that could be both the end user in terms of the customer, but also the end user in terms of the business user as well. So we very much need to be, as data scientists, we need to be walking the line between data and business. So our role is moving away from being where we are, fitting machine learning models to data sets that we find, more towards a place where we are adding value to data and understanding, or being required to understand more of the business aspects as well, and being that bridge between the two. So to walk that line between business data, we need to be able to understand the needs of the business user and also of the customer as well. And that requires very much an empathetic attitude. So being able to empathize with an end user's frustrations, friction that they have within their workflow or within their customer journey, and suggesting ways that data and data science products and projects can actually help reduce that and help make their workflow easier or their journey better. And so this may not be machine learning. This could be, for example, working within a multidiscipline team to help them to help inform their decision on a particular product they want to produce. Or it could be creating a machine learning model to help predict a given variable, or it could be a customer segmentation or clustering algorithm as well. So it's very much broadening the toolkit of a data scientist to include a business understanding, an empathizing attitude with the customer and the end user, and being able to walk that line between business and data to add the most value. So that kind of attitude and that kind of skill set, I think, is very much required within retail. Retail is a very customer-focused industry, and so being a data scientist within retail requires that customer focus as well. So obviously everyone is aware of how retail works. We all purchase things on a daily basis. But I think there's three key areas to the customer journey, each of which data science can actually add to quite drastically. So you have the marketing aspect of the customer journey at the beginning, where we're marketing to entice customers into our stores or onto our websites. And then there is the purchasing process, I suppose. They're on the website, they're in store, and they're trying to find a product that they're interested in. And then there's the after sales experience as well. And so that could be services such as insurance, or it could be they would come to return a product or want a refund, or just following up on them to see how they're enjoying their product as well. And so data science can actually add a lot of value in each of these key areas. So for example, with the marketing, it could be we are helping our marketing team to better understand our customers by using the data that we have available. When they're purchasing products, that could mean that we are creating product recommendation models or creating models that help them to understand what other similar customers have also purchased. And then in the after sales experience, that could be more of a, as an analysis stage as well, where we're looking at, for example, how many returns are there for a given product, and if what can we learn from that? Can we change maybe the products that we're buying that have a lower return rate, etc., etc. So there's definitely a lot of ways that we can add value within this customer journey, but the key factor that I want to draw out from each of these stages is that each of these stages actually requires quite a deep understanding of the end user and an empathizing and needing to empathize with the customer throughout all of these stages to understand, okay, what are their friction points? What are ways that we could improve this journey for them? Retail has come quite a long way in a relatively short space of time. maybe 10 or 15 years ago, it wouldn't be uncommon to see a advert like this that you see on screen now. You know, a lot of bright colors, pictures, huge fonts displaying prices, you know, very much kind of a dazzling strategy. You know, we want to dazzle you with all of these amazing prices and these bright colors to then get you into our stores. It's actually a relatively ineffective way, I suppose unsurprisingly, ineffective way of marketing, because this is obviously going out to a large group of people, and the chances that it doesn't hit for a particular person are quite high. Because, for example, in this case, if you're not interested in phones, TVs, cameras, or irons, then this is actually not very relevant for you whatsoever. And so that is obviously where we've moved to, where retail now is a much more tailored experience and much more personalized for each customer. So now, for example, if you go onto our website and you want to look at a Sonos Play 5, then instead of being presented with, here are 100 other speakers and, you know, bright colors and big prices, you're presented with a much more tailored and kind of stripped down version, where you're only shown, okay, here are a few other products that other customers like you have bought, and here are some recommended accessories for this product. And it's actually a very big shift in terms of the way that we as a retail industry approach the product sale process. And obviously this is an area in which we as data science team can add an immense amount of value, because the product recommendation engines and the customer segmentation and clustering is something that is very common for a data scientist or a data science team to create. And actually this personalization and this tailoring is not just limited to the product page like we see here, but it also extends to the way that we market as well, and the way that we look after customers afterwards within the after sales experience as well. So, you know, there's a lot of use cases here, and there's a lot of ways that we as a data science team can add value for the end user. But as always, you know, more cases, more problems. When I started in the data science industry 3 years ago, we were very much trying to find use cases for data science and trying to apply data science to them. Whereas now people are much more aware of what we can do and what we can offer as, you know, as a team or as an industry. And so, you know, there's a lot of use cases available now that weren't available even just 3 years ago. And so the skill of a data scientist now, I believe, or a very undervalued skill, is actually which of these use cases that I've been approached with adds the most value. How am I going to find which of these use cases helps the end user the most, or helps the business user the most? You know, which reduces the friction within a workflow the most? Those are actually quite difficult things to find out, and is becoming quite an important skill for a data scientist. So a way in which we have done this within Allwright recently is actually with a project that we undertook within newsletter personalization. So I'm sure that everyone here has either an inbox full of newsletters that they've never read, or has unsubscribed from a newsletter today, or, you know, has even just never signs up for newsletters because they don't think that they're relevant. They can actually be very useful forms of marketing, and very useful for the end user as well if they're personalized. So if they're useful for you in terms of being recommended products or being personalized and tailored for you, then they're very useful tools. Whereas if they're just standard newsletters that are sent out to everyone, then they're obviously not very useful for you. And so we were approached by our marketing team because they wanted to add personalization to their newsletters. They had been running tests because they had this hypothesis, obviously, that, okay, if we add more personalization to our newsletters, then click-through rate and other performance indicators will increase. And so they ran tests for this hypothesis and found that actually that was true. The performance indicators increased. Okay, therefore, let's go ahead with this and let's build this. So obviously they wanted to move away from the traditional kind of manual segmentation or just sending the same newsletter to everyone to a more tailored approach. So this is a key value of how we can add value as the data science team. And so this seemed like almost a no-brainer for us, really. So when going into this project, we need to understand quite a few things, and we need to ask a lot of questions. So we need to understand both users. And when I say both users, I mean the end user, the customer who's going to be receiving this newsletter, but also the business user who's going to be creating these newsletters as well. So, why are we doing this? Okay, does it add value to the customer? They had ran tests, X and Y and Z, and they found that adding this to this newsletter increased the performance indicators by 10%, for example. Okay, well then that's great. That's clearly proved your hypothesis, and we can move ahead with this. Who is the end user, and what do they expect to see? So who is going to be receiving this newsletter? What kind of person is going to be seeing this? What does a customer want to see? Obviously, we can use a lot of our own experience within this because everyone receives newsletters and everyone has an idea of what they like and what they want to see. But then that also means maybe we need to be speaking specifically to Allshop customers to find out what they want to see and what they are interested in. And also, what can we learn from what is being done currently? And I think this is often the case within data science or within just software development in general, is that we often want to just create the new thing and just scrap the old system. But actually, there's a lot that we can learn from the way that things have been made and the way that things are being done currently. So how are they currently sending out newsletters? What's the current feedback that they've got? And we can learn a lot from that, obviously. And then also, how can we implement this into their workflow? It would be incredibly inefficient to replace the whole marketing CRM software just so that we can include this small segmentation into their workflow. So how do we fit within their current system and within their current workflow is obviously a very important thing. So all of these questions help to inform the way that we created our data science solution. So that helped us to understand how we're going to segment the customers, what are the particular areas that we need to look at. So it helped us to understand, okay, then we need to be segmenting on things, for example, are they a bargain hunter? Are they an early adopter? Do they only purchase in store? Do they only purchase online? Are they what kind of products are they buying? Are they buying just home products, or are they a gamer, for example? So all of these questions and this kind of research phase helped us to understand the way in which we created the solution. So the architecture and the way that this ended up looking was relatively simple. Obviously, we take all of our data from the data warehouse that we have, ran the model through Azure Machine Learning Service, and then sent that data that we created onto the marketing software and CRM that they use. One thing that we were very aware of and were very keen on doing when creating this project is we wanted to include simplicity as a feature, as a feature of the way that we create the project. We wanted it to be very easy to maintain and very easy to develop further. Because the thing with customer segmentation is that we can segment customers on X amount of features today, but what if marketing come to us next week and find a new area or a new feature that we should be clustering customers on? Then we don't want that process to be very cumbersome. We want it to be quick to add. So we used k-means clustering because it fit us or it worked well for our particular use case. But also because it's a particular model that a lot of data scientists know and are aware of and have worked with a lot, which means that when we're onboarding new data scientists, then this would be a project that would be quite easy for people to understand. And obviously, we also predict customer lifetime value at the same time as we're doing this clustering, because that is something that marketing wanted to help with their personalization of their newsletters. So this project, added a lot of value for both the end users in terms of the customers, but also the business users as well. It meant that they were able to personalize their newsletters in a lot more ways than they were able to before. And it meant that customers are able to have a more personalized experience as well. There's obviously a lot of issues that we faced when creating this project, even though it was a relatively straightforward thing for us to do. We actually have relatively few touch points with our customers. When we're not a grocery store, so we don't have, a daily or weekly touch point with customers. On average, customers purchase 1.9 times a year, 1.9 times a year with Elshep, which means that it takes a while actually to build up a good amount of data on particular customers. And also the product purchase cycle is actually something that impacted this a lot. If you go to a grocery store and you purchase a certain type of bread every week, then it's very likely that next week you'll also purchase that same type of bread. Whereas if you go to Elshep and you buy a TV, that doesn't mean that you are going to buy that TV again next week. It means that you'll buy another TV in 4 or 5 years' time, probably. And so that means that when we're clustering customers, we need to possibly be clustering on different features, not just what you buy, but also where you buy it, how you buy it, how often or how much, these kind of things. And actually means that we learn from, okay, maybe instead of showing you TVs now because you purchased the TV, now maybe we need to be creating systems that mean that you start seeing adverts for TVs in 4 or 5 years' time because you purchased TV last week. And of course, the customer golden record, which is, I think, often a problem for people within the retail industry and also other industries as well. People, their cycle for choosing a product and deciding on what to buy and when to buy it and where to buy it is very split up. It's very rare that someone would, say, for example, just pull out their phone, start searching for things, and then buy it immediately, especially when we're talking about, large items like TVs and computers and laptops and things. So someone may, for example, look at a TV on their phone and then a couple of days later look at it on their laptop and then go to a store and purchase it, and each time using either a login or no login, or using maybe a different person's login as well. And so whilst we have a lot of data on customers, they may not necessarily always be everything that has ever happened for that customer, because the collection of that data is relatively difficult. So these are obviously issues that we faced, and I think are often very common within the retail industry especially. Obviously, there's also learning points as well, and these are the key takeaways that I want to pull out of this project that relate to this topic of user-focused data science. So by understanding the needs of the business user and also the customer that was receiving the newsletter, we were able to add a lot of value. We could have just created a customer segmentation model using k-means based on a data set that we received, but we wouldn't have necessarily had all of the context and all of the understanding that we gained from taking time to empathize with and understand the users. And so that helped us create a much better and much more well-rounded product. Another learning point is that simplicity is key. We want to be able to add new features and add new clustering groups as quickly as possible and push it to production as quickly as possible. And so by keeping the algorithm and by keeping the architecture simple, then that made that whole process a lot easier, which means that then customers are able to see new personalization and new tailoring quicker, which adds a lot of value for them. And then obviously working within the existing workflow helps the business user by not forcing them to change completely the way that they work and the way that they create newsletters currently, then helps them to have a better workflow and is also save costs as well in the long run. So if that was all a bit too long, didn't read, then the kind of key takeaways that I want to pull out of this talk is we are in an interesting stage now in terms of data science, where it's becoming much more integrated into organizations, and people are starting to understand much more about what we can do. And so I think that we need to start focusing on value. What can we create that adds the most value for our organization, rather than what is necessarily the most research heavy or intellectually stimulating. And also, how do we understand and how do we empathize with the end user? I think this is going to become a much more sought after skill in terms of being able to walk that line between business and data and understand how the end user experiences our product, and how we can use data to help improve their experience. And also actively finding friction. I think we add an immense amount of value when we understand how end users and business users, how they work and how their journey is through our product. And so I think actively being in the organization and actively seeking out these friction points, I think really helps us to find problems before they become too big, and it helps us to find use cases for data science within our organization. So yeah, that's it for me. I just want to say thanks for listening, and I hope that you have a good rest of the conference. Bye.